What up, ball? Wait, that's not my intro. Oh, g'day, mate. Hey, welcome back to another video, you absolute legend. Take a seat, put your feet up. We're going to talk about killers in DBD that require the most skill. Spoiler alert, it's a bamboozle clown. Video over. Bamboozle clan is #1 spot, requires the most skill. Just kidding. Alright, super long intro out the way. Let's start off. Number 5, we got the nurse. Now, it's just saying that I can feel, I'm gonna have protesters at my window saying, Lucky, what are you talking about? Nurse is like #1. What on earth makes nurse number 5? Just hear me out, okay? What even makes nurse difficult to start with? Let's be real. What is the one thing that takes time and actually practice to learn as nurse? The blinks. And that's just, let's be real, that's muscle memory, honestly. That's playing nurse, blinking everywhere because you don't really have a choice. Otherwise, you're going to be moving it like slower than a survivor speed. So muscle memory of playing nurse to get the blinks down pat, pretty much. That, no, I'm not denying that takes time. That's, you know, that's a skill in itself. But I'm putting her down the list this far because there's one thing more important than that, and that's the core mechanic of the game, I feel like, and that's looping. And the nurse just ignores everything. You got a god setup, you know, like let's say shack into a long wall, just window to window, bang. You got a bunch of pallets in the area. You got some good fillers and stuff like that. The nurse just bypasses all that stuff. That's something you don't have to really spend time learning, is I guess the looping side of things. It's a way different playstyle. So I'm not trying to undermerit the skill of nurse, the blinking for sure, you know, safety blink, prediction blink, all that stuff. But all that aside, she's cutting out the core mechanic of the game, and that's why I've put her so far down. All right, number 4, the big man Oni, with a condition. He can't be using that add-on called Top Knot, because that's like doing stuff with Oni that maybe you can't necessarily do without Top Knot. So why number 4 spot? So he needs skills that M1 killers obviously have. He needs to learn how to run tiles, mind games, all that sort of stuff, because the M1 hits is what gets him powered up. Now, the second half of his power, that's the Blood Fury, I believe it's called. Pretty much where he uses that Kaioken and then powers up and stuff like that. And then he can do the whole demon dash thing. That is a skill in itself, I feel like. Charging the dash, going around structures, when to start the dash, faking directions, curving with the dash, and lastly, the flicks. Now, I've only seen, I think, 2 Onis in my whole time that are 180 flickers. Like, there's some crazy players out there with Oni, don't get me wrong. And there's literally 2 that I've ever seen that are doing these like just insane 180 flicks, and that is just something in itself. So, you know, I got to put him at number 4. He needs to be a good M1 killer. We got to learn all that, and then the demon dash and that section aside is just something altogether in itself. And when you see it only do like these crazy 180 flicks, it is actually it's so cool. It's a sight. Like, if you go down to that, it's like, oh shit, man. Like, firm handshakes all around. That's nice. And when you see him do that, when you see him dashing in one direction, then all of a sudden he's done a full 180 and he's slamming someone. It is pretty cool to see. All right, on to number 3. We have to give it up to the Amazoness looking woman, Huntress. That is, okay, with another condition, just like Oni, I suppose. I'm giving her number 3 spot if she's not using double wind up. Pretty much reduces this time it takes to pull up a hatchet. If she's not using those, then I'm firm on number 3. Because obviously, just in my opinion, I feel like those double wind up takes away some skill at things such as filler pallets, maybe like shack and stuff like that, or window, every tile altogether, but specifically filler pallets, I might. Because if you think that she's going to pull and you run through or you fake it and she respects, because she has double wind up add-ons, you might win the call, the coin toss, the mind game, you know, predict her correctly, but because she has the double wind up, she can still pull and get you before you get around the corner. That's what I don't like. You made the right call and the decision, but because she bought these 2 add-ons, well, too bad. So you have to learn tiles, making reads on survivors, mind games and stuff like that. I guess to a lesser extent, if I'm honest, than Oni, because hatchets in itself are anti-loop. I mean, you can still be ran on a tile, but the survivor might just take different pathing, and so that's something else you have to consider, I guess, as her. They can take the optimal path as survivor to utilize windows and resources, but they also might change it up a bit, and you have to just be aware of that. And especially, I feel like because you're slower, you really got to be like on top of it. I feel like that, and I feel like that's when your 110 movement speed really comes in. It like plays the most part. What else is important with her? Reading survivors, learning patterns seems pretty important, especially when it comes to stuff like filler pallets. Will me as the Huntress pull, or am I going to walk through? Seeing what the survivor plays like and kind of learning their behavior on the fly. Are they going to drop the pallet? Are they going to greed? Things you need to try and pick up on as you play. Actual throwing of the hatchet. Obviously aim, like, so without question, the aim is super important. But also, again, making reads, will they dodge and how they move, when to throw, things to consider. All right, moving on. Number 2 spot. Got to be the cheeky bugger himself, who I do have a soft spot for. Blight. With another condition, version without speed add-ons. The less speed add-ons the Blight is running, the more challenging the killer is, just in my opinion. That's just how I see it. I mean, I'm not a Blight pro, but I've played my fair share of Blight. So what makes him number 2? What makes him the second hardest in terms of skill out of every single killer in the game? Okay, obviously running tiles like normal, if that's the way you play Blight, everyone's different. Some people use the speed to get around, and then once they catch up, they just turn into an M1 killer. That's fine. So play him however you like. I prefer to use my M2 and rush everywhere, but you still need to learn pathing and the route the survivors are going to take and what windows they might utilize and stuff like that, even though you have your rush power. Knowing distances between you and the survivor and where they're at, when to swing in a rush, when to bump again, bump logic is another thing to consider. All the techs that Blight has, like hug tech, scoot surfs or scoot slides, some people call them, I guess. Also interesting is that you need to think and adapt on the fly. Tiles for starters, but what's connecting these tiles? Stuff that you can bump on around that particular tile. Every time you spawn into a trial, stuff's going to be moved around in different positions, maybe from last time. And thinking what you can bounce off of mid-chase is super important. Lastly, chuck this in there as well. What has collision and what doesn't have collision? And then using that knowledge to your advantage. That's good to know, unless you're playing maps like Swamp where it's just so unpredictable. Nobody knows what you're going to bump off and what you're just going to slide across, so... All right, number 1. It's got to be my boy. It's got to be my boy, Billy. Specifically, double engravings, Billy, because that's what's pushing him to the top, in my opinion. I sound so egotistical, I swear, because I play Billy. He's pretty much all I play, and I use double engravings pretty much every game. But what makes him so hard? I honestly don't want to like talk your ear off about it. And I swear, looking from the outside in and taking into account that behavior has listed Billy as easy.
So that was a fucking lie.
You might think Billy is so simple to play. Like, he has an insta-down power. I mean, what more could you want? Has mobility. He can just zoom around wherever he wants. What the fuck are you talking about, Lucky? You've been sniffing glue again? Hear me out, okay? What makes him so difficult? For starters, like most of these killers, you need to be a good M1 killer. I cannot stress this enough. You need to know how they're going to take like tiles and pathing and all that stuff, because I hate to say it, but as the survivors get better, the chances of using a chainsaw become less. They're going to force M1s and make it so difficult for you. You need to be switched on with how they take tiles, because I guess in a weird way of saying, you're not actually anti-loop, like a demo or a pyramid head where you can just, you know, wait till your animation locked and then do his power, or a spirit or a nurse or something like, or even a death slinger or even a huntress. I mean, he's got instant down power and he can zoom with it and be quick with his chainsaw, but it's not exactly anti-loop. What I'm saying is, as the survivors get good, they're going to use every single thing they can to prevent you from getting chainsaw hits. Now, let's say you've burned all the resources in the trial. Well, you've still got like recyclable structures to deal with, like L&T walls, which aren't even that great. But if you want to if you want to get chainsaw downs, it can be quite tough. And they're going to force M1s. So you've learnt mind games and running tiles, right? You make a correct call on someone. You do the correct mind game. For example, you predict a window vault, and you know they're going to take the window vault. You moonwalk it back. You make the right call. You know they vault. You meet up with them. They're standing there. They're looking a bit silly. You've won it. You pull up your chainsaw. You go for their insta down. They just medium vault back. Just another thing you have to factor in. Yes, great. I might call it right, but then after that, you know what's going to happen after that? They're going to force an M1. So just more things you have to consider. You need to learn how to feather your chainsaw to 99, or as close to fully charged chainsaw as possible. Obviously not fully charged, because if you do, that's going to send you off into the sprint, but you need to be feathering it, obviously is the name, back and forth as close as you can to charge. All right, now let's get on to the double engraving side of Billy, where the skill ceiling is just so high, and what puts him at number 1 spot, just these 2 add-ons alone. So double engravings, the flick Billy, the curve Billy, however you want to call it. So double engravings pretty much mean you move faster while you're in a chainsaw sprint. So let's talk about the curving and flicking, the skill itself. So you need to learn firstly how to feather your chainsaw. So when you're 99ing the chainsaw, bouncing it back and forth to as close as you possibly can to fully charging it. Not quite fully charging, because if you do, you're going to go off into a sprint, but you need to hover as close as you can fully charged. You got that part down? All right, sweet. Now the positioning, whereabouts on the tile or the debris or the car do I need to pull up my chainsaw, and also when to start the sprint, but also when to actually start the chainsaw sprint. If you do it too late, the survivor's going to have enough reaction time and distance to make it to the pallet or structure or the window. Too early on the flick, you might collide with something. So you're trying mind games on a jungle gym, or back and forthing with the chainsaw 99 at a car, something like that. You need to push the survivor into sort of an overcommit before you can even think about going for the sprint. You need to make them commit to one side, or you need to make them commit to something or one side of something before we can even think about releasing the chainsaw. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. So you've got all those previous things I've listed under your belt. You've got it all sorted out. Beautiful. So after all that work, you've done everything right. You've released the chainsaw. Stars have aligned. You're zooming. You're going in hot. This survivor that you're running down is going to end up on the Bluebird application. We're chucking this survivor in a montage. Time slows down. You cannot believe it. Oh, everything's working out correctly. I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. Bam! Get the camera! It's about to connect. All this hard work's paid off. This hit is about to connect. I cannot believe it. And the survivor sidesteps. And you're standing there looking foolish. You could do everything correctly. Make the right reads. 99. Moonwalk it. Do the flick right. Don't over flick. Don't under flick. Coming in hot. About to hit the survivor. Steps out. Now you're just standing there looking foolish. This is just yet another thing you have to consider when going for these. Now, something a little bit extra that you can do with double engraving. It's a skill, I guess, on its own. That's doing the whole Hillbilly thing. Using those speed increases to launch yourself on top of like tiles, buildings, random stuff on the map. Positioning of all that is pretty difficult sometimes, and knowing all the spots, where to stand, when to release, stuff like that. So that's pretty hard in itself. Anyway, my boys, I hope you'd enjoy this little tier list video and didn't talk your ear off too much and didn't upset too many people. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, consider buying me a Zinger combo. If not, I'll settle for a cheeky like. Peace!
Push the button. Come on, push the button.